Victor Harlow walked into the Grand Crest Hotel with nothing but a heavy duffel bag and a silent determination that no one around him could sense. By the time the truth of what he carried was revealed, the building would be surrounded, the streets emptied, and an entire city held hostage to his obsession for revenge. The story began on a cold winter evening when Victor Harlow arrived at the Grand Crest Hotel carrying a dark duffel bag that appeared too heavy for one man to handle. Guests lounging in the lobby barely noticed him, though a few staff members later remembered the unease in his eyes and the way he gripped the bag as if it contained something precious. He requested a room on the highest floor with a balcony, speaking in a low voice and avoiding eye contact with anyone who tried to greet him. To the reception staff, he looked like another tired traveler, but beneath his calm exterior there was an intensity that would soon reveal itself in the most dangerous way imaginable. Once he received his key, he disappeared into the elevator, leaving only the faint smell of cigarette smoke trailing behind. Victor was not a man who found comfort in hotels. In fact, he despised their polished lobbies and cheerful employees. To him, they symbolized a world that had cast him aside, a world where success belonged only to the powerful and ruthless. He had spent years battling frustrations that never seemed to end: legal battles, financial losses, and an overwhelming sense of injustice. That night at the Grand Crest was not about rest or escape. It was about settling scores that had consumed his every waking thought. While other guests prepared for dinner in the hotel restaurant, Victor stood at the balcony of his room, looking down at the bustling street. His eyes scanned the sidewalks, the entrance doors, and the cars pulling in and out of the lot. Every detail mattered to him, for he had chosen this place carefully, and he intended to make it unforgettable. Inside his room, he unzipped the duffel bag, carefully laying out its contents on the bed. The items looked ordinary to anyone unfamiliar, but to him they represented the culmination of months of obsession. His breathing slowed as he examined each piece, his hands steady and deliberate. The room itself felt detached from the rest of the building, silent except for the distant hum of the city outside. He moved with purpose, as though rehearsing a script only he could see. Unknown to those just a few doors away, Victor was already setting the stage for a nightmare that would shatter the quiet elegance of the hotel. His plan was in motion, and the clock had begun ticking long before anyone realized the danger lurking behind a locked door on the top floor. Early the next morning, unease spread through the Grand Crest Hotel when Victor failed to respond to repeated knocks from housekeeping. At first, the staff assumed he was simply a late sleeper, but soon after, a folded piece of paper was discovered pushed under the office door of the manager. The note contained a chilling message scrawled in uneven handwriting, threatening destruction if anyone attempted to enter his room. The words mentioned explosives, and though they were brief, the implication was unmistakable. Within minutes, the hotel manager called the authorities, and what had begun as a routine morning quickly escalated into a full-scale emergency. Police vehicles surrounded the hotel, their flashing lights reflecting against the glass windows as guests were ushered out under careful supervision. Those who had been asleep were startled awake, rushed into stairwells and out into the street, many still in nightclothes. Confusion and fear spread through the crowd as rumors of a bomb began to ripple from one guest to another. By the time specialized units arrived, the once bustling hotel lobby had transformed into a command post. Negotiators set up their equipment, and tactical officers surveyed blueprints of the building. Snipers quietly moved into position across neighboring rooftops, their scopes trained on the balcony, where Victor occasionally appeared, pacing like a caged animal. Every attempt to make contact with him was met with silence. Calls to the room phone went unanswered, and messages shouted through bullhorns brought no visible reaction. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing hour, as if the entire building was holding its breath, waiting for the moment something would break. Guests who had already evacuated watched from across the street, some crying, others whispering nervously as they tried to piece together what was happening. Few knew that Victor's duffel bag was more than just a threat. It was very real, and every sound of movement from inside his room reminded law enforcement that they were facing a man determined to see his plan through. Officers in the hallway outside his door reported hearing faint metallic clinks, the kind of sounds that suggested construction or preparation. Specialists warned that he was likely assembling something dangerous, and the risk of a forced entry grew greater with each update. The hotel, once considered a safe haven for business travelers and tourists, had become the epicenter of a deadly standoff. Every minute stretched into an eternity as the line between safety and catastrophe grew thinner, and the shadow of Victor's threat loomed larger over everyone involved. Investigators began piecing together Victor Harlow's past in the hope of uncovering what had driven him to this dangerous point. The picture that emerged was one of a man consumed by bitterness and failure. Years earlier, he had run a modest construction business, one that provided him with pride and stability. But after a prolonged legal dispute with a powerful corporation, his company collapsed. Court records revealed he had fought tirelessly, filing appeals and complaints, but each attempt ended in defeat. The losses stripped him not only of his business, but also of his reputation and financial security. Those close to him recalled how the man who once thrived on hard work became increasingly paranoid, certain that the system had been rigged against him. The Grand Crest Hotel was no random choice. It was hosting a conference that included several executives from the very corporation he despised. Detectives realized that Victor's plan was deliberate and deeply personal. He had not chosen the hotel for its location or its comfort, but for the symbolic value it held. It represented everything he believed had been stolen from him: wealth, power, and the people who thrived while he lost everything. Old acquaintances described how he had withdrawn from society in the months leading up to the incident, living in isolation and spending hours posting online messages filled with anger and threats. His words had grown darker with time, hinting at violent fantasies, yet no one had predicted he would take them this far. Inside the command post, the discovery of his motives shifted the operation's urgency. This was not simply a case of a troubled man making vague threats. It was a targeted act of revenge with dozens of innocent lives caught in the middle. Officers understood that the executives upstairs were more than just bystanders in his eyes; they were his intended victims. Every hour Victor remained locked in his room increased the chance that he was finalizing his preparations. Security experts warned that if he had indeed constructed an explosive device, then the standoff could end in disaster. Authorities wrestled with a grim question: should they wait in the hope of negotiation, or risk storming the room and triggering exactly what they feared? The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone involved, as the reality of Victor's obsession revealed just how dangerous his plan truly was. As the standoff dragged into its second day, tension inside and outside the Grand Crest Hotel reached a breaking point. Police had sealed off several city blocks, rerouting traffic and turning the usually lively district into a ghostly, cordoned-off zone. Officers rotated in shifts, but fatigue showed on their faces as they kept constant watch on the top floor. The building stood eerily quiet, except for the occasional flicker of movement at the balcony, where Victor sometimes emerged, scanning the street below as if daring someone to come closer. Each time he appeared, a hush fell over the gathered crowd, followed by the clicking of cameras from reporters desperate to capture the unfolding drama. Inside the command post, negotiations continued to fail. Experts tried every method, from appealing to his sense of reason to offering him safe passage if he surrendered. But Victor remained silent, never picking up the phone, never writing another note. The only sounds heard from his room were troubling metal scraping against the floor, the sharp clink of glass, and occasional muffled thuds. Bomb technicians studied the noises carefully, warning that he was most likely assembling a device from the contents of his bag. The uncertainty of how powerful it might be kept everyone on edge. A single mistake could endanger the lives of the officers positioned just beyond the thin wall of his barricaded door. The situation escalated further when the building's fire alarms suddenly blared. Smoke began seeping out from under Victor's door, curling into the hallway. The sprinkler system sputtered to life, sending water cascading down onto the carpets. Panic rippled through the security teams as they debated whether it was a genuine fire or a trap to lure them closer. Firefighters were kept on standby, forbidden from advancing without clearance. The noise and confusion added another layer of chaos, leaving many unsure of what Victor's next move would be. Every second seemed stretched and uncertain. Hotel employees huddled together in blankets outside, shivering not from the cold but from fear of the unknown. SWAT officers grew restless, itching for orders to move in, yet commanders hesitated, knowing that forcing their way through could trigger the very explosion they hoped to prevent. The standoff was now a dangerous stalemate, the fragile balance between control and catastrophe swaying with each unpredictable moment. All eyes remained on that top floor, where one man's silence had become more terrifying than any words he could have spoken. The final hours of the standoff unfolded with terrifying speed. As night settled over the city, the flashing red and blue lights reflected against the wet pavement, casting an eerie glow across the evacuated streets. Officers stood in tense silence, their radios crackling with brief, urgent updates. Suddenly, movement was spotted on the top floor balcony. Victor stepped out into the freezing night air, his figure illuminated by the glow of the city lights. He clutched a small handheld device, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the mass of police cars and emergency vehicles below. The crowd of onlookers across the barricade gasped in unison, realizing that the long threat was about to reach its conclusion. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Negotiators attempted one final appeal over loudspeakers, their voices echoing up the side of the building, but Victor gave no sign of listening. He raised the device slightly, as though showing it to the world, a grim symbol of the power he held in his hand. The stillness broke in an instant. A deafening blast erupted from the top floor, shattering glass and sending a fireball tearing through the night sky. The explosion rocked the entire structure, hurling fragments of concrete, metal, and furniture into the street below. Flames roared from the balcony as black smoke billowed upward, blotting out the stars. The force of the blast caused part of the hotel's upper level to collapse, crushing several rooms and leaving gaping holes in the walls. Sirens wailed louder, their urgent tones blending with the screams of panicked witnesses. Emergency crews rushed forward, pulling people back as debris rained down. The once pristine Grand Crest was transformed into a burning skeleton, its luxury destroyed in seconds by a single violent act. For law enforcement, the fear they had carried for 2 tense days had materialized in the most devastating way imaginable. In the aftermath, investigators carefully picked through the wreckage, confirming what many already suspected. Victor had detonated his device intentionally, ensuring his death and the destruction he had long planned. Miraculously, the swift evacuation had spared the lives of many guests and staff, though several injuries were reported from the blast and falling debris. The incident left the city in shock, raising painful questions about how a man's anger could grow unchecked until it reached such a destructive end. The hotel stood as a charred reminder of the danger born from obsession and resentment, a scar on the skyline that would not soon be forgotten.